There's an ongoing upheaval to the current world order as we know it. The rise and unification of nations to contest the global power that the West holds is leading to events that, when fully understood, show a deeper issue that will soon challenge our life as we know it. While the United States enjoys the many benefits that come from having our currency as a reserve currency of the world, there are nations that are one by one joining an economic alliance that will soon be able to work around the systems that have benefited the United States and its allies for decades. This will lead to an inevitable contesting of the world's power structures, culminating in a confrontation that will soon have profound impacts. In this video, we're going to take a look at BRICS, the expanding economic alliance that began with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It is now seeking to expand its membership, destabilize the dollar and euro, and completely alter long-established boundaries and trade agreements. It has recently made great strides to this end and is implementing a game plan to completely replace the United States dollars as a world's reserve currency by 2025. This is a massive threat that you need to know about because it has the potential to change the entire world forever. Download the Start Preparing Survival Guide to help you prepare for any disaster. I'll post a link in the description and comments section below, or visit cityprepping.com/get started for a free guide to help you get started on your journey of preparedness. A brief history of BRICS. The acronym BRIC was first established in 2001 by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill. It was an investment strategy in Brazil, Russia, India, and China that was predicted to dominate the global economy around the year 2050. South Africa was added in 2010 and became BRICS. Goldman Sachs eventually abandoned it as an exclusive investment strategy. These 5 countries are part of 5 significant trade agreements: the South American Free Trade Area with 11 member nations, the Economic Union Free Trade Area with 8, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation with 15, and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement with 34 member nations. Together, the 4 original BRIC countries comprise more than 2.8 billion people, or 40% of the world's population, cover more than a quarter of the world's land area over 3 continents, and account for more than 25% of global GDP. It's a tectonic shifting group that is massively influential and is only getting bigger. Massive expansion of the Axis. Egypt ratified its participation last week. Argentina, Algeria, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Indonesia, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia are all leaning towards or taking steps toward joining the alliance against the dollar. Mexico, South Korea, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Pakistan, Philippines, and Vietnam are all leaning towards membership. The Bank of Indonesia called upon importers and exporters to stop payments in the United States dollar. Russia is bolstering its transaction outside of the United States dollar. China is facilitating billions more in transactions in yuan. The new development bank, or NDB, in Shanghai in 2004, with $50 billion of startup capital, was another milestone. The NDB replaces the IMF and World Bank. Their interbank cooperation mechanism would seek to replace SWIFT. The BRICS Contingent Reserve Agreement, or CRA, balances these transitions for member nations by facilitating a liquidity mechanism for members facing short-term balance of payments squeezes or currency instability as they transition. Any way you cut it, BRICS is a formal rival to the G7 nations. As BRICS grows, the dollar and euro will proportionately drop in strength. So here's why this spells trouble for the status quo of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency that everyone has traditionally traded with since 1944. BRICS nations are developing their own transactional system outside the US-controlled SWIFT system and encourage transactions in local currencies over US dollars. Clear battle lines are being drawn. Coupled with global inflation and recession, we're very likely on the cusp of an economic world war. Without the SWIFT system and the economic sanctions the G7 can agree to impose on rogue nations, there is no mechanism to deter countries from human rights violations or even invading neighboring countries. Sanctions become meaningless. As a US-led post-war system crumbles, a new world order is emerging. Anti-Western, communist, and authoritarian countries like Russia, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and China are basically huddling together to counter Western influence. Their game plan would entirely replace the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, World Trade Organization, SWIFT, and the dollar all by 2025. The axis of countries is a behemoth hostile to the United States, Europe, and the United States dollar. This unprecedented rise of an authoritarian axis, rivaling the democratic order led by the United States, opens up China's ability to make territorial gains, Russia's ability to fund the invasion of more countries, the Islamic Republic's ability to ignore any nuclear deals, and the list goes on. Any despot leader would commit any number of atrocities, from ethnic cleansing to invasions of sovereign nations, with the confidence that the other BRICS members will simply turn a blind eye to their actions. Each country has its own motivations for joining, but there's an underlying tacit agreement not to influence other members' nations' actions, no matter how horrific. The Islamic Republic of Iran, for example, wants to join to develop outside of sanctions and be free to build its own nuclear arsenal. China is motivated to expand its market share away from the United States. Russia wants to be free to pursue its efforts to reunite the former Soviet bloc nations by force. India, they hope to amplify their voice in global governance and to expand the choices of international partners. Brazil's left-leaning government hopes to emphasize South-South diplomacy to please their domestic political supporters. South Africa, having already suffered from sanctions in the past, wants to court China's support in Africa's growth. Multipolar forces. If you live in one of the countries not part of this axis, it will have some profound effects over the next several years. First, natural resources, economic resources, and trade will all flow away from your economy and into the feeding of the axis of nations. Imagine the impact of Brazil's $26 billion in iron ore or $20 billion in petroleum no longer going to your country, but exclusively to China, Russia, and Indonesia. Imagine India's exports of $61 billion in oil, $13.6 billion in machinery, $11.7 billion in pharmaceuticals, or $12 billion in biochemicals similarly flowing away from your country to feed this growing aligned axis. We've already seen what dramatic shifts in the flow of natural gas and cereal grain can do to the world. If your country uses the dollar as its reserve currency, as most do, buckle your economic seatbelts because your economy is about to take a nosedive. A reserve currency is a currency held by central banks in significant quantities. It is used to conduct international trade and financial transactions, eliminating the cost of settling transactions involving different currencies. Historically, shifts from one dominant international currency to another occur over many years, as occurred when the dollar took the dominant role from the British pound sterling. This significant and sudden shift of the greenback will result in central banks shedding what they hold, and the flooded market will exponentially drop the dollar's value. Suddenly, everything you want to purchase, from a stick of gum to a tractor, will cost more with your dollar buying less. That will drive the cost up of everything higher and make a global recession and inflation look like the peaceful, calm moments before the storm strikes of a worldwide Great Depression, at least a Western storm. As BRICS expands and implements its agenda, a multipolar system is established that cleaves the world into two separate pieces. One is the traditional methods by which the world is operated with pro-democracy and anti-authoritarian ideas. The other is an authoritarian group of nations that shares anti-Western ideas and has traditionally had a dismal track record when it comes to human rights and a history of territorial expansionism. Some would cheer this and praise the dismantling of the old systems in favor of new systems. That argument may have some merits, but the details and the nitty-gritty of that exploration could quickly fill volumes and is too far complex of a discussion for this short video. More concerning to us is the instability created by these two competing, economically warring polarities. It will result in economic upheaval, global flare-ups of economic unrest, and possibly an outright global world war. With the conflict in Ukraine and the potential conflicts in Taiwan and the South Pacific, we could already be nearly there. I know this is a bit of a heady and complex subject to tackle, especially in such a short and compressed video, but you got to understand how this is already impacting you in the world and how rapidly and dramatically it will escalate from here. If you've ever had a long-term threat to your food, energy, water, finances, resources, and social stability, this is it. If you needed a reason to really focus on your preps and bolster your self-sufficiency, this would be it. And this is only going to intensify over the next several months and years. Barring the collapse of China or Russia, their programs to disrupt the Western status quo are on cruise control really at this point. Hundreds of new trade agreements will result in a complete rerouting of the existing supply chains. Those agreements will be transacted outside the US dollar, and the tectonic shifts in economies will occur as a result. The best thing that you can do right now is to brace for impact. Bolster your food resources. Supplement your food resources by producing some of your own food or finding local sources. Expect that your grid and infrastructure components could eventually fail until the massive machinery and parts that are needed to maintain them are sourced within your country. Right now, so much of our infrastructure is sourced outside in these countries that are building this system. Financially, as these polar extremes pull apart, there's a very real possibility that precious metals will rise as the only valid means of cross-polar value. And look, I try to be cautious about making financial recommendations on this channel, and I have no sponsorship for precious metals. I only say that to make it clear that I have no conflict of interest in pointing this out, but it's something that you may want to research a bit further. I'm by no means advocating that you go out and buy it now. Research it. That's all I'm saying. Now look, I try to err on the side of caution with this channel to not bring up issues like this with the intent to scare my audience, but I would be remiss if I didn't inform you the seriousness of the BRICS axis and why you should be prepping to endure this economic world war that we're looking at right now square in the eye. In this next video, I expect that we'll be unpacking this out further and witnessing and reporting on how it will impact supply chains and economies around the world. Until recently, BRICS was more of a hypothetical threat, but with the recent expansion, the war in Ukraine, and the strengthening of the China-Russia alliance, these threats are easily becoming one of the greatest threats to global stability that we've witnessed in our lifetime. I would encourage you to prepare accordingly. And I'll post some links to some of the resources that we studied in preparation for this video if you'd like to take more of a deep dive to study this yourself. As always, stay safe out there.